GHH,
Hey, what up, though?
Gentlemen's History Hour. What's up with you, my bro?
Hey, I'm cooler, man. It's 10X and my boy right here, man.
Equality, man. How y'all doing? We saying what's up to the public, saying what's up to the people. We living in some pandemic times,
Hey, some unpredictable times.
some quarantine times.
Most definitely, dog.
It's different. Let me ask you a question. During these quarantine times, people are talking about vaccinations, to vaccinate, to not vaccinate. I'm not even gonna get into the politics of that. I'm just gonna ask you, do you trust doctors?
No, and I don't know why. And like, I to be honest, it's almost like through osmosis, I don't trust doctors. I don't trust big pharma. I don't trust this, and ain't nobody ever told me not to trust them. I just like by my black existence, I've never trusted them. You know what I'm saying? Like so.
Well, you know what I one of our goals here at Gentlemen's History Hour is to tie in a little bit of history, and it's some context to the people watching this. It's some context to our what should I say, mistrust?
Yeah, I'll take it back to our first episode when I had mentioned at the time epigenetics had first been introduced to me, and epigenetics being the trauma passed via DNA to the point where you don't even have to meet the person who you received the trauma from. It's not just a direct mother to father relationship. You could have trauma from a great aunt, from a grandfather, from a person who you never even necessarily personally encountered. Yeah. So that makes all perfect sense as we introduce this subject of
the Tuskegee Syphilis Study that we all know and hear as the Tuskegee Experiment.
Most definitely.
But today we're gonna talk about the Tuskegee Syphilis Study.
Tuskegee Syphilis Study, and I got a couple facts just about.
Which was an experiment too.
Yeah, it was the study/experiment. I got a couple of fun facts about syphilis that I wanted to give to people.
Fun facts about syphilis?
I don't know. Let me say, I got a couple of facts about syphilis that I want to share with the people. Syphilis was first documented during Christopher Columbus' return to Europe after his 1492 trip. Some famous people who are known to have kind of not necessarily died but greatly suffered from syphilis is Al Capone, and also it is believed that Hitler suffered greatly from syphilis. It is most commonly spread today from men engaging in sex with other men. And right now in America, studies have shown that only 18% of African Americans are familiar with the Tuskegee Syphilis Study or the Tuskegee Experiment. Wording it either way in studies have shown that we're operating at a less than 20% informational experience as far as Black Americans.
We say it, and it's been referenced in pop culture a lot. And now the reason why I started the show the way I did is because now they're coming out with this vaccine for the COVID-19.
Yeah,
and a lot of people will make reference to the Tuskegee Experiment. And I don't know how much context they have outside of they just heard Tuskegee Experiment.
Yeah,
they just some people just say it's like the Tuskegee Experiment. Okay, so what does that mean? Is that just something that you heard or is referenced in pop culture? What was the deep dive in understanding that? We were talking earlier, if you say that now, how long do you think a person would guess that it lasted? Just say, well, how long did the Tuskegee Experiment last?
I told you, like, my guess would have been like Tuskegee Experiment. I would have guessed like 8 years, 12 years.
We got to keep going.
Yeah, I would have never guessed the number,
40 years from starting in 1932, ending in 1972. A full 40 years.
Yeah,
a full
I would have
40.
never thought that. And if you would have, one of the surprising things to me was not only like the volume of time that it lasted. If you would have asked me when it took place, if you would have asked me, this same exact Rob J. You asked me this in 2019. What years do you think the Tuskegee Experiment took place? My answer would have been, 1830s, 1840s. I would have stood on that. That would have been final answer. Like, who wants to be a millionaire? Final answer. I don't even need to call nobody. You know, that I would have thought, like, if you would have gave me 4 A, B, C, D, A was 1810, B was 1840, C was 1930, D was, ending in 1972. I wouldn't even thought CD. I would have been like, okay, context clues, B. And
you said around, you would have thought what, 18?
I would have thought 1830. I would have thought it started around, or it took place primarily around.
Oh yeah,
that
we
point.
didn't even have the Tuskegee Institute at that time.
Yeah.
So if we're gonna tell the story, part of the history side is walking into it with the preconceived notions. It's like you said, those are kind of the preconceived notions. You say, okay, maybe it lasted 8 years, or maybe they just took some black people and laid them down and started cutting them open. You start thinking of experiment, and it's a lot of folklore that goes behind it, but then you got to dig deep and try to find the facts. So what's the facts? They have facts, and then they have the stories that's been told and that's being repeated. And I'm starting to approach history almost like a story. Where's it start? How do we start this story? Who are the characters that's a part of this story? What roles do they play throughout this story to make it kind of fun, to where it's not just, it could be scholarly, but it can also be fun throughout their quest. So I'm just looking at all these different characters and giving context to 1932. That was the start of the actual study. But that's not the actual context of where we would go when we started talking about it with Gentleman's History Hour. So we hear the word Tuskegee, so we know Tuskegee plays a role in it. And Tuskegee was the university founded by Booker T. Washington.
Yeah.
Now, Booker T. Washington died in 1915. So Booker T. Washington dies in 1915. I want to say maybe about 11 years later, in 1926, was when we started talking about syphilis treatment. And also why Tuskegee was the place. So now we think about the location, and we're talking about the place. And then the importance of Booker T was his connection with a philanthropist. A lot of times, and even now, this is how it connects now. Who is one of our biggest philanthropists now that's pushing this vaccine?
I say Bill Gates.
Bill Gates.
That's no pre-show. That ain't no. That ain't no alley-oop.
No. I mean, I'm just generally asking.
I'm generally answering.
Correct. So I'm saying that to say this isn't anything new. Yeah. So Rockefeller was the guy at that time, and then you also had a guy by the name of Julius Rosenwald.
Okay.
Rosenwald was one of the co-founders of Sears and Roebuck. Okay. The famous Sears and Roebuck. He was the president of Sears and Roebuck. So he didn't have Rockefeller bread, but he had a little bread that he wanted to do some philanthropy himself. Okay. He already had a connection with Booker T. Okay. When Booker T. Washington at at some of the inception of what they called back then the Tuskegee Institute. It wasn't the Tuskegee University that we know now, but it was the Tuskegee Institute. So this guy, Rosenwald, he wanted to build schools. He wanted to help contribute to build schools for African Americans. Right? So he and Booker have a relationship. Booker dies around 1915. Now we got another guy. I don't think they called them presidents back then. They were principals of the university. So Robert Moton becomes the principal after Booker T dies. Okay. So now he has this relationship with Julius Rosenwald. Now, one thing that Rosenwald looked at was, well, I want to contribute to education. And then one of the things he remembered from talking to Booker T was, for kids to really, really be involved in education, they need to be healthy. If a kid isn't feeling well, they're not going to do well in school. So now we get this philanthropic cause of healthcare for Black people. So now we're looking at 1926. So people watching, it's like, oh man, what they got to do with the cutting Black folks open? Yeah. Which that never happened. But the whole these preconceived notions that we have. So what's the phrase? The path to good in the
pathway to hell's paved with good intentions.
Good intentions.
Yeah.
The good intention was, hey, syphilis is coming into play. Now, the reason why Tuskegee was that spot for this syphilis study was they had a high population in Macon County.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, so we're not talking about the actual the students at the school. This is the community, a community full of sharecroppers around this time. It was a high rate of illiteracy around that time,
and I think it does kind of play a little bit to the myth of the black black male as the over sexualized, not smart being who is controlled by his
his libido.
Exactly. So
yeah, those were some of the stereotypical parts that came around that time. So the guy Rosenwald, so he meets with the public health, the U.S. public health. They had these different divisions on diseases. So you're looking at, initially they started with 6 different states, and then they look at the numbers of what's going on in Macon County.
Okay.
So Macon County, Alabama becomes a prime territory. You got around that time about 35% out of every 1,000 people had syphilis.
Okay.
Supposedly. And of course, they're not people are poor. So they can't afford to get any treatments or anything like that. So he meets with one of the directors of public health, and that director was the guy, Dr. Clark.
Okay.
So
Dr. Clark name, because his name reads like Tafilio, but it's Tolliver,
Yeah, Dr. Clark Tolliver. So he's over venereal diseases. He's studying syphilis. So of course, if you go to him, he's gonna say that's the most important disease that's going on at that time. So he sells it to Rosenwald.
Okay.
Now remember, this is still around the 1926 to around 1929. So it started with good intentions to treat the people.
And I think to your point, and I think just to clarify too on the listeners, during that point, there was a head pretty much for not every disease, but
they had directors.
There was directors for major disease, kind of like today. If you go to a low T center, you're gonna come out with low T. So it's kind of a similar thing to when they went to addressing that.
So Tolliver was able to kind of sell, hey, you need to be investing your money in syphilis.
Exactly.
In the treatments. So you start with, you want to treat these people. So you're saying, okay, this is impoverished town. It has a high percentage of syphilis. So now we're saying 1926 to around 1925. 1926 to around 1929. Now, in history, and a lot of this ties back to some of our old episodes. If y'all watching, it's a lot of stuff overlaps. Because we kind of touched on this during the Thanksgiving episode. One thing that happened was the stock market crash or the depression around 1929. The Sears and Roebuck stock was, what do they call it in the stock world? The plummet is when it.
I would say, I think plummeted would be
when it goes up.
No, plummet is when it's just like it's a plane going down.
It was it plummeted. The stock market crash. We got the Great Depression. Rosenwald was like, hey, I can't fund this anymore. I can't fund the treatment. So this Dr. Clark Tolliver, this is where his cunningness comes in the worst way. He's like, okay, well, we can kind of continue it, and this is where we get into the whole study. So they're untreated. So now it goes from let's treat the people to we don't have the funding to do it, but we want to continue this. So now we in the 1932. Now we get into these 1930s where it's becoming this study / experiment.
Yeah, and then to be clear too on the Dr. Tolliver, because I know when we start dealing with history, there's multiple counts of what happened. Now, I have read counts where, you know, he was like, hey, in on the pivot. I read other counts where he was like, hey, I'm down to do this for a year. After a year, y'all still down with this? I can't mess with it. But like, what is the conclusion that your research has come to in regards to Tyler?
Well, he was a part of the treatments for about 6 to 9 months.
Okay.
And then they started losing the funding. So then you bring in these other two people. That's the Oliver Wagner guy.
Okay.
And then the other guy, Bundler.
Okay.
You know, so the other guy, you got Oliver Wagner, and then I always forget his first name, but I want to give it to the people to make sure that that, you know, when they do the research, they can look and they'll understand the name. Robert Bundler.
Oh, man, come on, Robert gang, y'all gotta represent stronger. No, so Robert Bundler.
So they were sent down to start that study.
And I got a question too, because I remember from what I was looking up this hypothesis, and want to get your feedback on this. Mm-hmm. Some of the hypothesis being that maybe the black man's body didn't, on the inside, was a different type of recipient versus the white man's body of the same disease. And if you came across,
that's where a lot of research and medical records and a lot of stereotypical information was coming out. It was no different than, it's like somebody saying, oh, black people can jump higher, they can run faster. But then they'll say, well, white people are smarter, they can think more. So yeah, you had certain studies that were saying that it was affecting us more from a cardiovascular side. And then those same studies saying, well, it was affecting white people from more of a neurological side.
Okay.
You know why? Oh, because white people, they have big brains. Black people, they have big hearts. They're stronger. They work the field. So it's that type of research that's being propagated out there. Yeah. But just so that Rosenwald fund is terminated. So Dr. Clark decides he wants to study the untreated syphilis. And so that's where we get into the propaganda that you're talking about, the racial propaganda. And
is that where the 399 who were infected come from? Is it?
Yeah, well, his thing was, Dr. Clark was that I want to show that syphilis, that if it's untreated, it'll kill you.
Because one thing I wanted to make sure we covered and touched on too is like what was told to the participants of the experiment. And from the research I had come across was that they were under the guise that they were receiving free health care from the government.
Yeah, they were never told. They had no idea.
Yeah, so
they
were not being treated.
But just to keep the characters involved in this story, in this picture that we're painting for people, there are other characters that look just like me and you that are involved in this, that we'll call them co-conspirators. One, if you started this at Tuskegee, they had a hospital. They had a medical research hospital for the students. That was part of the program at the Tuskegee Institute. And the person that was over that medical department over that hospital, his name was Dr. Dibble, Dibble, Dr. Dibble. And then they also had a nurse, which if you do any studies or type up Tuskegee Experiment, her name more than likely will pop up because she played a role from the conception from 1932 all the way to 1972, the whole 40 years. And that's Eunice Rivers. She was a nurse, a black nurse. She was a student at the Tuskegee Institute. So now when the funding is removed from the Rosenwald and they don't have the funding, and now you're going and you're saying, okay, let's do a study on untreated syphilis. Remember, we were treating it before, now we don't have the money, we don't have the funding. So now you get into the lies, and now you're crossing these lines of bioethics. Yeah. You're just violating.
And we gotta be one thing about GHH, man. As much as I hate for us to have to do this, man, we gotta be fair. We gotta hold our ancestors that are participants accountable. So we got to be fair about what, like directly, what, our ancestor Eunice Rivers directly did and what she said when there were people who were in line to be treated and how she,
Well, yeah. Now, once it becomes this study, so just to give some more context, you got 600 black men.
Mm-hmm.
I want to say it was 399 that were infected, 201 that were not.
Yeah, that's what I come from.
In this study that they, during the treatment time, you can say, yeah, these people were considered patients. Now during this time, they are considered more so subjects. Mm-hmm. They're not even patients because they're being untreated. So it's her job to soothe over these subjects and talk to their families. So she's the person that's like the link between the what's going on this medical side and dealing with public health. Because it's always, looking at history, to me, you got the politics, you got the political angle, you got socioeconomics, and you got racism all tied together. Mm-hmm. So now you're looking at the socioeconomics of the conditions of the people in this area in Macon County. And you got Nurse Rivers that's coming out. She's coming to the family. Oh, okay, we'll give you some medical treatment. We'll give you a hot meal. This is going to be a part of this study. We're just testing your blood.
Yeah.
You're not knowing that. You don't even know whether you have syphilis or not at this time.
Yeah. You're
a part of this study. Oh, it's going to be good for medicine. Dr. Dibble, hey, he had self-interest. The principal at that time, Robert Moten, he had self-interest. Hey, the sciences, and this will advance the university. This will advance the Tuskegee Institute, and we'll be at the forefront. The doctor had self-interest. The nurse, and then the white people that are in the perimeter that's using them as the pawns at play, of course they had an agenda.
Most definitely. I think the one thing that like to me would kind of crosses the line from being like something that was wrong or bad to like something that was like morally evil is the fact that, and I don't have the year, I'm looking in my notes frantically while you're talking, but I don't know the exact year, but for us to have known at a certain point a cure to come out and then still withholding the cure from these people.
Well, in 1990, remember in 1929, they had treatments.
Okay,
remember, they were
getting
treatments.
Okay, so at that point,
they were getting treatments. Now, as we go down the line and you start, because you had World War II coming out, and of course the penicillin will come, and then that will become the ultimate. Okay, you take some penicillin, but then we'll get into how that was even co-opted. You got to remember, they were just studying these people until they died. Yeah. So we're untreated. You're not getting the proper treatment, even though that treatment is available. You're my subject. I have to keep you in the dark.
That's the part to me that's where it's like that. To me, that's where it goes from being like a wrong to an atrocity, because it's like we had we knew about the penicillin, and these people were showed up. And to me, like, and one of the things I cringe. I heard somebody else say that this week, and I pray that I'm never around nobody physically that talks about us being willing participants as well. We chose to be slaves, whatever that kind of ignorance that people say, because a guy was saying something along those lines, and I feel like people who say certain things about our ancestors, they're not able to fully inject themselves into the experience that they were having. And it's like if you take somebody in the 1920s, Tuskegee in their mind has been nothing but a shining example of what we're capable of as African Americans, as black, foundational black Americans, Pan-Africans, whatever you want to call us. So it's like me saying, if I live in DC and someone says that Howard is offering me free health care and I'm a black person from an impoverished area of DC, what incentive, how in my mind does it even cross that this is something that is nefarious in nature? This is a setup. This is like that. Yeah. It would never cross my mind. I'm an impoverished black person, and Howard has been nothing but a beacon of excellence. So you telling me they're offering free health care. Why would I have any guard up? You know,
yeah, you're getting the free and we'll, hey, if something happens, we'll cover the burial.
Exactly.
I mean, you're getting sold this dream. But you raised another point. Prior to even selling it to the subjects or these 600 black men, you got to get the community to buy in that these people are coming down to even start this. This is how we do it. We go and sell it to the ministers and the other people. Now, they don't know. They're being sold that it's going to be treatments.
Yeah.
Right? These treatments stop. Now, here's where we get to Clark. He retires for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Some say it's because of old age. Some may say, what did you say prior?
Kind of like it was a little bit like morally, he was down to do it for a year, but when it went on, he had a problem with it.
When it was over, he retired. And then now Robert Vanderleer comes in and takes over. Because one of the things with the study that was brought to my attention was the big question of how did this last for so long?
Yeah, that's
how
a
did this
great
go
question.
from 1932 all the way to 1972?
Just
it was a lot of things happened in history.
I just want to sidetrack you for 1 second, like, because as much as we study Black history, we talk about Black history, I just want you to name what else was going on during that time in comparison to how much attention we're giving this. Like you,
oh man, World War II it went on, and that was there were pivotal moments where these brothers should have gotten the treatment.
So you had the World War II, and
you had the Civil Rights Movement going on. In
I was shocked when you told me
35 miles up the road from Macon County, where this took place. 35 miles was Montgomery, Alabama, where the whole the Bush boycott started, and the Rosa Parks and the Civil Rights Movement was going on.
I was shocked to learn that.
But you had to keep people in the dark. So if this is going on, and no one alarms anyone, so that's the politics of it. You got the U.S. Public Health Services that's playing a part in this.
Yeah.
Pivotal, the Surgeon Generals. These people are playing parts in this to keep. It's kind of like something, you're getting a little bit of it, and you don't challenge it enough, but it continues to go on in the dark.
Most definitely.
So now Clark leaves, Robert Vanderleer comes in. He wants to continue this study. He's like, no, we're going to keep continuing the treating these black, well, let me not use the word treating. They're studying these black men. They're untreated. Remember, they just go, and it's not like a reoccurring thing where they just keep going back and forth to the doctor. No, you're not letting them know what they have. You go to the doctor, he says, well, you got some bad blood, because you got all this folklore going around in the community. Is it syphilis? Is it bad blood? It's like with anything else. You got Rona, COVID, you got the flu, all of the folklore. So now it's being told to you is, well, you just got some bad blood.
And one thing that's unique about syphilis too is that, like, I know syphilis has 4 phases, and the first phase of syphilis will actually naturally heal on its own without any treatment. Not to say you're not cured from syphilis, but like the initial, rash, sore will heal on its own. Even the part 2 will actually heal on its own. So it is something that if you were hesitant to get treatment, or if you were hesitant of you actually having something, you can, by misguided evidence, believe and see reason to believe that it's no longer affecting you. The thing that appears on genitals and stuff during phase 1, that actually will go away on its own with no treatment initially. Now it will come back, but we're just speaking about you.
Well, that was part of the propaganda too. With if you talk about the racism in medical research in these papers, black men, they're hypersexual. Mm-hmm. So you're attaching it to this is a venereal disease. For one, the cardiovascular, and now it's a venereal disease. So now we're hypersexual. All of these things to perpetuate. Mm-hmm. To perpetuate this study, because remember, we're just studying you. You don't have an option on whether you're going to get treatment or not. We're withholding that from you. You don't even know that the blinders are covering your eyes. That's where these co-conspirators come in throughout this process. And so now you got this other guy, Robert von der Leer. He comes in. Hey, let's keep the study going. Yeah. He's working for the public health services. Of course, they want to keep it going. Part of the reason why I went on for so long in the research that I found was that in places like public health, they promote within. So a guy that may have started in his 20s, he goes up the ranks, and then now he's the director. He wants to continue what he started when he was a young guy coming in public health. So now you have these different directors. They want to continue to study because it's something that they bought into when they were younger. So they've been promoting within. They didn't go to the outside. An outsider may have looked and said, whoa, we need to stop this.
Yeah.
So you're promoting within. That's the politics of the public health issue. So now you're telling the person, okay, they don't even know they have syphilis. You're telling them bad blood. And you go, and now you're giving them these placebos, which is just this almost fictional way of treating a medical issue.
I always wondered, just on the neuroscience level, were any of the placebo people actually healed? You know, because outside of the historical element, I'm a neuroscience fan if nothing else. You know, studying. So, is there any evidence of people who were actually given the placebos that actually just through, because 20% of modern medicine is placebo. So is there any evidence of any of them actually healing themselves?
I haven't found any evidence of that. And to give context on a placebo that was going on during that time was, okay, cardiovascular. So now we'll give you a spinal tap, which is really a shot. I'm hitting you with a 12 gauge needle with no, what do they call? I don't know why.
That's anesthesia.
No anesthesia.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm telling you, to get the pain, to take these aspirin and take this tonic. And so of course you're taking the aspirin. You're not really getting any treatment. That's for the pain of me sticking that needle in you.
Man, that's so wild, man.
But you think that you're getting treatment.
Yeah.
So it's all this misinformation that's being propagated and promoted to the people that's part of this study. Yeah. So now, once again, if we go down the timeline of what's happening, and certain things are going on in history where these men could have been treated. One was World War II. World War II was around 1939. So you got World War II. What's happening with World War II? They start drafting.
Yeah.
So 1/3 of the brothers that were part of this study were eligible for the draft.
You gotta tell me what happened to them.
So now this is where the Surgeon General at that time gets involved. This is where Miss Rivers and some of the co-conspirators get involved. So now it's a letter sent to the Surgeon General saying, hey, we got to study, because if they get drafted, if these brothers that's eligible to get drafted, 1/3 of them are eligible to get drafted, they got to take a physical. They get a physical, find out they have syphilis, now they can get treatment. No, we don't want them treated.
Man,
so you send a list basically saying don't draft these people because they are fighting a medical war.
That's wild.
Don't send them to, they doing something for their country. They're fighting a medical war. So here's a list of names. You don't draft them. We need them. So think about it. At that time, a brother could have got drafted, found out he had it, and could have been receiving treatment. Because remember, throughout this whole process, there was treatment.
Man, that's Sister Rivers down bad. I'm not messing with no Rivers. Doc Rivers, Austin Rivers, Philip Rivers. She down bad for that, man.
And then they later in the timeline, and I gotta find it in my notes because I want it to be very thorough. Because when we started talking about something like the Tuskegee Experiment, in 1943 you had the Henderson Act. It required people to be treated at the state's expense.
Okay.
So here's another. So now in 1939 you got World War II. 1/3 of the brothers could have got drafted. No. They doing a favor to the country. They fighting a medical war.
Yeah.
Then you got this
Did
Henderson
they use
Act.
the term medical war? Is that how they
Well, that's how they what did they say? Soldiers of science. That's what they call them.
Man, that hurts.
So not medical, soldiers of science.
Man.
So this Henderson Act, now you got that. So once again, we don't want to apply it to the brothers in the study. So when they come down with this Henderson Act for treatment, one of the roles of Nurse Rivers was to go and grab the men and make sure they were taken out of the line so they wouldn't get the treatment, to continue this fictional study, which really you're just waiting on somebody to die. It's just a human cadaver.
Yeah.
At that time. Because you're going to study, okay, you catch, I'm going to drift off a little bit. You catch HIV. Well, we have treatments. Not you. Somebody catches. Let me say this. Somebody catches. Someone catches HIV.
Yeah, what's up?
And they have treatment. And they say, oh, no, we're going to do a study. We're just going to let you live with it and see what happens.
I feel you. Okay. So
and so now it's like, okay, well, you're just using me I'm just a human experiment. Now it's a Tuskegee experiment.
And on their end, I mean, to me, it highlights like just two things. Like it highlights as a scientist and person studying. I mean, yeah, there's nothing more valuable than an actual human body experiencing whatever it is, the science, the method, or the hypothesis that you're testing. But for it also highlights how lowly we stand, in the view, to where like it would cross your mind like go ahead and use them. Like, at that point we were supposed to be, quote unquote, full American citizens, like, and for you to kind of, and I'm not saying it would have been any better had it been another ethnicity, but we literally have been here from day one. And I don't think outside of, white people, I don't think that there's any other ethnicity that can say, and obviously Native Americans too, but outside of them, there's no one else that can say like, we were here day one. So for us to be thought of so lowly to where like we can run experiments on y'all, it really hits home as to at least, an understanding of why on both sides. Like, I understand why there's a certain feeling of like, I'm not taking no vaccine today, or I'm not taking that. And I didn't know where the why came from. It was, like I said, it was osmosis.
Well, all of this, the context of it is rooted in our mistrust. When I asked you the question of, do you trust doctors? And maybe I should have worded it different. Maybe I should have said, do you trust, the medical field? Because I don't want to just single out doctors, but doctors were also co-conspirators. Because you got doctors as a co-conspirator. You got the government, you got public health as co-conspirators. So just for context, around 1945, penicillin is coming in. So now you had the Henderson Act. You had World War II. You got penicillin is becoming known as, okay, yeah, that's what you would need to treat it. And you've been denied. At every phase, you've been denied. You haven't been able to receive any treatment as this goes on because of the co-conspirators. And then now you got these different directors that are coming in, and they want to continue. They're being promoted from within. So each director wants to continue the study. We're going to continue what they're calling a study, but we're not going to treat these men.
Yeah.
600 people.
And the crazy part was all of that going on is, I didn't realize during that era that you had black people that literally their whole life from birth to death never visited a physician. There wasn't a checkup. There wasn't a lot of times there wasn't the things that we consider normal now. I mean, it doesn't matter if you could be in the middle of the projects, if a 13-year-old in the projects has a child today, it's kind of a given that child is going to be born at a hospital. That child's going to have a checkup when it's like, maybe 6 weeks, a year, 18 months, toddler, there's going to be certain benchmark that child has to hit. And if that child doesn't hit those, there's going to be like a quick alert, like, hey, at this point, that child's be doing this.
Yeah.
So to imagine a whole ethnicity of people to have an experience almost like physician and doctor free, it's like, wow, like you really wonder, like, dang, I see how a person can,
Yeah, it causes this mistrust and the saying of black men don't go to the doctor.
Yeah.
A lot of it is rooted in what happened during this Tuskegee Syphilis Study, this Tuskegee Experiment.
Yeah.
We go down this timeline. So just to give some other context, just some of the words they were using, like a roundup. Mm-hmm. So remember we talked about the guy Oliver Wagner and your guy Robert Vanderleer.
Yeah, my guy. He just shared, he shares the
They
name.
got the same name.
Yeah.
So they, with Nurse Rivers, a part of that roundup, to round up these brothers to get them. And then another guy, John Heller, becomes the director of the venereal diseases in public health. And he's continuing the study. He was there, I want to say, from like 43 to 48. And the reason why I bring him up is because, as part of the studies, as part of the research, Dr. James Jones, who did some extensive research on it, was saying, hey, sometimes people think these were just some unknown people.
Yeah.
The guy, John Heller, he also became ahead of like the cancer institutes and cancer research. He was the director of the National Cancer Institute. So you got to think he participated in this, and then he becomes the director of the Cancer Institute.
That leads to a question I had. I know a lot of viewers may have. Is like, what either judiciary or just was there any punishment exacted on the practitioners of the study? Like, when this came out, what were some of the things exacted on the people who participated?
Okay, so we get toward how it ended, because to answer that question, you have to talk about how it ended in the after effects.
Okay.
Because what happened was it was a civil suit. It was a settlement out of court.
Okay.
So there was no, none of these doctors were indicted or anything of that nature.
Well, speaking of how it ended, why don't we speak on like the journalist who had pitched that story and
the guy Peter Buxton.
Okay.
Peter Buxton, around the late 60s, was want to say he's studying sociology, and he's a part of these different groups, and he was going to school for his advanced degree, maybe not a PhD, probably to get a master's.
Okay.
So he's researching, and he comes across what's been going on in Tuskegee. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of what would be considered a whistleblower. Okay. Because remember, this is going on, and when you're untreating people, once again, this not like they got to just keep coming back. You're just watching them. You're just sitting back throughout the years. And this would have kept going on without this guy, Peter Buxton, being the quote-unquote whistleblower. So in short, he finds out, he raises hell. Of course, they're trying to silence him. Then he's dating a lady. She's a journalist. He tells her, she tells someone else. Now it goes to the AP, the Associated Press. They pick it up. Now when the press has it and it's out in the open, that ends it. So now the civil case comes. It was a prominent civil rights attorney. Remember, we touched on what was going on 35 miles outside of Macon County. They also had the civil rights movement in Montgomery, Alabama. During that time, you had a lawyer by the name of Freddie Gray. Freddie Gray was a lawyer for Rosa Parks.
Wow, okay.
Freddie Gray was a lawyer for Martin Luther King Jr. Freddie Gray wanted to fight. That was his goal, his vision. Hey, I want to fight segregation and civil rights.
Okay.
So now he gets involved. You get a $10 million settlement for the families
Okay.
And just to give some context on the after effects of this with this study, 128 men died from syphilis or the complications. 40 of the wives were infected, and 19 children had the disease passed down from the course of the study.
Wow. And if we didn't say, it can also be passed down via pregnancy.
Yeah. So that's another thing outside of just being a venereal disease.
Yeah.
Congenital. It was congenital as well.
Mm.
So now Freddie Gray comes in, files this civil rights suit, $10 million goes to the family. Some were still existing survivors getting the money. So this same civil rights attorney that crossed paths with Rosa Parks and Martin Luther King Jr., now he becomes a part of this Tuskegee settlement.
He had a fire client roster.
Yep.
Shout out to Freddie Gray, Attorney Gray.
Yeah, Attorney Gray. So they settled out of court. And without this whistleblower, without this Buxton guy, who knows how long it continues to go on.
Man, shout out to the whistleblowers out here, man.
So just imagine it was going on in the dark. Because you got to think, this is Macon County. It's Macon County, poor area. These sharecroppers will keep it on the low. They're just subjects. We're just watching them, waiting on them to die. We made a deal with the family. So now when they die, we can do an autopsy. That's part of the deal.
And I think one thing that stands out to me is how the ignorance is preyed on. And I'm not going to correlate and say that a COVID vaccine is the same as the Tuskegee Syphilis Experiment. But when I hear Dr. Fauci say something like, "To my African brothers and sisters,"
yeah, that was wild.
It was made. The vaccine was developed by a black person. I've never heard you refer to us as your African American brothers and sisters before. You've never, throughout this whole COVID, you've never referenced an African American working on something as a reason for us to believe in it. You didn't say wear masks because an African American said wear masks. Yeah. You didn't. There's nothing in this process that you referenced African Americans for. And now all of a sudden there's a needle that you want us to stick in our arm. Now we're your brothers. And we even had an African working on it, and and I think it's interesting to me that for black people, some of our suspicion, we're not just suspicious. We didn't pull this. This is not from a Marvel movie. This is not from Batman or anything like that. This is from real life experience that comes from, and I think we should honor that.
Yeah. Well, Bill Clinton in 1997 issued a public apology.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
And there were some of the survivors there. So the president had to issue this public apology. Think about that. Yeah. Public apology. So I was thinking about what you just said with the Dr. Fauci and bringing the context to now. And the light bulb went off in my head is that, we talk about history, and I have to think we know this stuff. There are other people that know this stuff. If someone says, man, they were able to do that. Now, in our minds, we're thinking, damn, they got away with that from 1932 all the way to 1972. How the hell they get away with all that? Someone else is thinking, how did they get away with that?
Yeah.
you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you're looking at it from a view
wonder
of,
how.
Yeah. So they did. So they co-host this person. So they did this. So they did that. So they were able to rile up and get the community involved. So they were able to sell it like this.
Yeah.
So someone else is looking at it from the perspective of, how can I pimp that? Now, sometimes people look at history to repeat it for their own benefit. We study it, and we may study and say, hey, man, they got away with this. How do we find out ways to not repeat this?
Most definitely.
Someone else is sitting there saying, how can I find a way to do what they did, and maybe I could do it for 50 years, 60 years. Not saying that that's what's going on now, but that light bulb just went off in my head that people are not stupid, and we can't remain ignorant. So when we start throwing out words like Tuskegee Experiment,
Yeah.
there's a lot of context that comes with it. It carries a lot of weight outside of just a pop culture reference.
Yeah.
Yeah, Gil Scott wrote Tuskegee 626, and he was raising awareness around that time.
Most definitely.
But now, to dig deep into it, when we start talking about vaccines in 2020 and 2021, and people are gonna try to make those parallels, just have an understanding of the context and know what you're talking about.
Most definitely. And I say, and this is a jewel that I received from Scholar Fred, is that
Shout out to Freddie.
yeah, when you watching any episode, I'm a co-host, and you see I'm up here with a pen and pad listening to a co-host, and I'm writing things down. Anytime you hear a word that you don't understand, whether it's on YouTube, TV, whatever, if you have access to a pause button, stop it there, write the word down, look it up, and familiarize yourself with that before proceeding. That's a scholarly way of consuming information. Even when you listen to this show, don't just listen to it. Don't be entertained by history, because this isn't an entertainment show. This is an educational show. You know what I'm saying? And if you're not careful, it can turn into education. I know it's fun hearing
Edutainment, as KRS-One would say.
Yeah, edutainment. But
Yeah.
make sure that hey, you taking your notes. If we say something, if we say a name, you go ahead and you look up Dr. Eunice Rivers. You look up, these times, so you could build on it. And I think.
Yeah. This is just the foundation for people.
Exactly. And I was going to ask you to close out. Was just what would you say to people right now that are kind of on the fence? Like, should I take the vaccine? Should I not? How would you?
Before I answer that, just one more little jewel.
All right.
You brought up the nurse and your perception of the nurse. Tuskegee gave her a merit award.
Oh, I can't rock with that.
as an alumni. And, now,
let me say this.
You talk to the families, she don't get that same energy.
Yeah, I'll say this, our experience is so complex. I can't define her exclusively by what she did in this one experiment, because, hey, maybe on the flip side, maybe she created 100 black nurses that wouldn't have been nurses before her. So that doesn't excuse what she did. But when we're talking about why schools honor, I come from a school. Hey, I'm a Florida A&M. I'm a FAMU graduate. I'll say this: Andrew Gillum is looked at as a hero from my university. Now, the reason he's looked that way is because people take the good of what he has done, and that outweighs anything, kind of gray area. So I'm assuming that her alumni does the same for her.
Well, it's like in a court of law. You lay out the evidence, you make your own decision. People can the evidence is there, it's been documented.
Yeah.
So, hey, they wanted to award her as an alumni with a merit award. They looked at the evidence. Of course, they don't want to be seen as co-conspirators.
Yeah.
So
that's tricky. Now I ain't gonna lie. I'm not the Tuskegee alum. Fam, you and me, we don't got no love for that.
But to your question, you asked me what would I say about what the vaccine is going on. To be honest, I would just tell people to do the research. Man, I don't want to, I don't want what I say to sway somebody's opinion left or right. But what I will encourage people to do is to study. And so when we have episodes like this, just to give people some historical context about the Tuskegee Syphilis Study or Tuskegee Experiment, it's just here to lay it out. And for me, I wouldn't just trust anything just on the first shot. I'm not just saying a vaccine. I don't just trust food that's just created in the lab or that just comes out. I don't even trust eating a bell pepper that's 2 pounds. So I'm that guy that's just read it and research it and understand that there is context why black people or people in the black community have a distrust.
I can dig that.
A lot of it is rooted in the history of this Tuskegee experiment.
Most definitely. Well, hey, Hey, I feel like that's a real thorough overview of the Tuskegee Experiment. I feel like we covered the.
Yeah, we got the characters. We got
I was gonna say the good,
dates.
bad, and indifferent, but I can't think of no good. So I'm gonna
Yeah.
just say we covered the bad and the indifferent.
Well, the good is that it got exposed.
Okay, I receive that. You know,
So it got exposed. So we're encouraging people, man, continue to do the deep dives, continue to study the history, study the now. It'll help you prepare for the future.
Hey, one love to
And
that.
keep the comments cranking, man. Y'all
Keep the comments cranking. And
Yeah.
look, while we on the subject of Tuskegee, we're gonna leave the experiments out. I can't have a Tuskegee come up without mentioning. Shout out to my beloved Aunt Melanie, Tuskegee graduate, beautiful, a follower of the show as well. My cousin Phil, also a Tuskegee graduate, and also Seneca Dunmore, also a Tuskegee graduate. I want to give the shout outs to the greatness of Tuskegee as well.
We got to bring some of them, man. We have the discussion on Booker T, man.
Most definitely. So, one love to the Tuskegee alums too.
All right, y'all. This Gentleman's History Hour. Peace. We appreciate y'all. Hit the subscribe button and keep following us every Thursday. New episodes. Peace. If you're watching this on YouTube, man, hey, y'all, hit the subscribe button. Hit the like button. This is Gentleman's History Hour.